Good morning again. We can never say good morning too many times. We're going to make it a good morning. We've been talking about this cycle of loving your neighbors. It's the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbors as yourself, to treat your neighbors the way that you would expect to be treated. All right? And then teaching them who God is, modeling who God is, imitating God. And that's the greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. To love God with everything inside of you. But we can't just focus on the two greatest commandments. We've got to serve each other. James says that faith without works is dead. I preached about it last week. In James, he says, don't you dare say to the person who's hungry, go, be fed. Don't you say to the person who lacks clothing, go, be clothed. If you're not doing something to help those people, your faith is dead. As Christians, we've got to take this extremely seriously. We've got to help people. We've got to serve. We've got to get in the lives of people. I love that this congregation's heart is in serving people. And I'm looking around, like just the visual. I don't know if you guys ever pay attention when you come in. Sometimes what we see is like the lack of, like extravagant decorations. And that sticks out to some people. When I look around, I see a whole bunch of water bottles in the back. I see food. I see around the corner, like the boxes just keep going, and eventually I think they're going to extend out the door if we don't move them around. All this stuff for the Magi boxes, and then in the basement we have a whole room with stuff staged to fill those boxes. We have a day where we're going to fill boxes together coming up here soon this month. We love to serve people. I just received a message from Joseph Smith from Healing Hands International, and I ordered extra books because we don't have the books for, the church doesn't have the copy of books for the wells for my brother Mike's well and for Mark Friedline's well. They sent them to the family members, but this time they didn't send them to the church. So I said, hey Joe, can you send us those books? So we're going to line those books up, and he sent a really nice email back, and he said, this was just a couple days ago, and he said, Jimmy, I just want to personally thank you and your congregation for what you guys are doing. He said, you literally, because of your heart to serve, you literally are supplying water for thousands of people. Thousands. And I already knew this, like mathematically I knew this, but to hear that, and to like actually hear that number in your head from somebody from the company who's very high up within Healing Hands, to say your congregation is impacting thousands of lives right now. I got really excited, and it just validates that the work that we do and the heart that this congregation has to serve people is absolutely incredible. We're going to talk about this more in the sermon today, but our theme this year is becoming the hands and the feet of Jesus. The verses come from Matthew 25, 37 through 40, and it says this. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he gives an example of him getting fed when he was hungry and him getting water when he was thirsty. And they said, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, and naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? You see, his disciples had never seen Jesus this way. He was always the one giving. He was always the one feeding. He was always the one clothing people and healing people. And Jesus responded, he said, the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. You do this to somebody else, you feed somebody, you clothe somebody, you give them water. You do this every time that we fill one of those boxes. It's as if we're doing that to Jesus Christ himself. We're serving Christ when we serve others. Jesus says, take it seriously and do it. Put your faith into action and serve other people. We couldn't do this without every single one of you helping out. Nisi, nice to have you back, by the way. It's been a while. Nisi's she's been away for quite a while, visiting with Roxanne and David. And as I looked back, I just thought of, like, you have a family member who, without her generosity, we couldn't have done one of these wells. The well that was just dug literally just got finished. It's servicing 850 people every single day. You look around and we have a heart. We have a heart to serve. And I love that. And so this sermon is not like talking down to people or depressing people. It's the exact opposite. It's to encourage us to keep doing what we're doing. To say that we have made it so far as a congregation and we have so many more people to bless, we haven't even scratched the surface. And that's exciting. All right, so today's sermon is about doing justice. Enoch read from Micah chapter 6, verse 8, and it says this: "He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice?" What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? You do those three things. According to Micah, God says if you do these three things, God is going to bless you beyond measure. This is what He doesn't want from you. He doesn't use the word want. He doesn't use the word expect. He uses the word require. God requires you to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Do you notice the action words? You notice that when a commandment's given, they don't describe it. They're not described with nouns and pronouns, and it's always an action. It's always a verb. Do justice. Love kindness. Walk humbly with your Lord. Our theme, be the hands and the feet of Jesus. Why was that our theme? Why did we settle on that theme? It's because the hands work and the feet move. The feet move us, and the hands are what serve other people. With our hands, we serve other people. We hug people. We pray with people. We deliver food to people. We put a hand on somebody's shoulder and pray for them when they're in the hospital and when people are broken. We use our hands and our feet to serve other people as the Lord did. To walk humbly with God, it means we move. As Christians, we don't stagnate. We don't sit. We don't park our rear ends down and say, God, I hope you just bless all these people. Right? No, we walk in our faith. We move to the people who are hurting. We move into the lives of the people who are struggling. I've heard people pray, God, I've probably prayed this a lot of times too. I've been guilty of it. But God, put people in my life. Put somebody in my path. In other words, smack me across the face with a 2x4 and put somebody in my face. Wake me up. Put somebody there. Pluck them out of the sky and put them in front of me who I can bless, right? We've been guilty of praying that prayer. You know what a better prayer is? God, move my feet. Get me off of my couch and move me into the life of somebody who needs Jesus right now. It's a much better prayer. Today we're focusing on doing justice. All right, last week we talked about feeding people who are hungry. But we're going to take that a little bit farther because it's not just about feeding people. It's not just about putting a plate of food on their doorstep. That's good. But the people who we feed, the poor people who we feed, the people who need food and water, we're also supposed to do justice for those people. So we're going to focus in on justice. All right, you're all going to take a picture of this because this is going to be our church tattoo. We're all getting tattoos. This is, some people are nodding. They're like, all right, finally. Nacy, be ready. We're getting this tattoo for you. Mishpat. Everybody say mishpat. Mishpat. This is the Hebrew word mishpat. You read it from right to left. This word is mishpat, justice. This is the word that's used in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Do justice. Do mishpat. Here's what the word means. All right, what does it mean to do justice? Like we hear that and we're like, okay, that sounds good. Sounds good. Here's what it means. This is from Strong's Hebrew lexicon. Here's the usage of the word justice, mishpat. The Hebrew word mishpat primarily refers to the act of judgment or the administration of justice. You ever hear the phrase, oh, Christians aren't supposed to judge? Don't judge or you're going to be judged, right? Like we quote Jesus, don't judge or you're going to be judged. We should never judge people. It's not what the scriptures teach, is it? Paul in 1 Corinthians 5, when talking about kicking out the person, you should be grieved by this person who's sinning, and you're all applauding him, you think it's funny. You should instead be sad. Paul says you should be upset about this. And then Paul says, are we not to judge those within? As Christians, shouldn't we judge those within? It's a rhetorical question. Of course, we judge those within. Here's what he's talking about. Krino is the word in Greek. It's the Greek counterpart to mishpat. Both mean the same thing, justice. Here's what it means. You're exercising an act of judgment or you're administering justice. But it's not your own justice. It's God's justice. It's rooted in divine justice. It encompasses a range of meanings, including legal decisions, ordinances, and the concept of justice itself. In the Old Testament, mishpat is often used to describe God's righteous judgments. The legal decisions of human judges and the laws or ordinances given to Israel. It signifies a standard of rightness and fairness. Have you guys ever heard me talk about God's foundation before? Yeah, Psalm 89:14. God's foundation is what? Justice and righteousness. The word for righteousness means balanced scales. It was a term used in the marketplace. It meant to balance the scales. God does not tip the scales for or against anybody. He begins with balanced scales. He looks at every single one of us, the things we think, the things we do, the thoughts we have, the things that are in our heart, all of it. God looks at that with balanced scales. He doesn't say, well, Jimmy's the preacher, right? He's more favored. Balanced scales. And so God's justice, which is also part of his foundation, flows from that rightness, that balanced scales. God metes out his justice, his mishpat, according to what we've done, not who we are. Oh, well, they're a priest, so, we're going to leave the priests alone. Or, oh, it's King David. He's my beloved king. He's a man after my own heart. We're just going to let him go. He can do whatever he wants. No, God does not tip the scales for anyone. So this idea of mishpat that's used in Micah, when we exercise justice, when we walk in justice, when we do justice, it means that we're anchoring justice to what's right and fair according to God. Reflecting on God's character and his expectations for human conduct. You know why we don't like domestic violence? You know why we don't like it? Because it doesn't reflect or signify God's character or his expectations for human people. You know why we don't like sexual abuse? Because it doesn't reflect God's character and his expectations for human conduct. You know why we don't like drunkenness and people acting like complete morons and talking down to people and mistreating people? Because it doesn't reflect God's character and his expectations for human conduct. It creates chaos, it creates harm, it creates problems within people's lives. That's why we don't like sin. All right, what about the cultural and historical background for mishpat, for justice? In ancient Israel, mishpat was central to the community's understanding of justice and righteousness. These two, you cannot unmarry justice and righteousness anywhere throughout the Bible or culture within the Jewish people. Anywhere. You cannot divorce justice and righteousness. The concept was deeply embedded in the covenant relationship between God and his people, where God was seen as the ultimate judge. In other words, don't hear do justice and it's as if you're God exercising justice to people. And I've heard people talk about leadership like that. Well, we're the leaders directed by God. So what? God is the judge. He's the ultimate judge. Ultimate mishpat belongs to God. We do justice anchored in God's justice because it's what's right, it's what's fair. We see somebody beating on somebody, we step in, we exercise mishpat, we exercise judgment, and we say, you stop this because it is not what God desired us to do or to be. You stop it. It's not okay. We intervene. The administration of mishpat was crucial for maintaining social order and ensuring that the rights of individuals, especially the vulnerable, were protected. The Torah, or the law, provided detailed instructions on how mishpat was to be carried out, emphasizing fairness, impartiality, and the protection of the innocent. All right, so I'll go back to the saying, it's not enough to drop a plate of food at somebody's doorstep and to walk away and you know that abuse is going on in that home, or you know that things are happening that feel off, or you know that somebody's being mistreated, or somebody's being denied services that they should be getting. It's not okay to walk away from that and be like, okay, well, I prayed for them. Going back to Micah, he says, God has told you, O man, what is good. He's told you. In other words, there's no excuse. You've got to do it. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice. It's the top of the list. Number one, to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. One more scripture that we'll look at. This is in Proverbs 31, verses 8 and 9. King Lemuel is recounting things that his mom told him when he was younger. And those of you moms, I know sometimes you think, these things aren't going to stick with my kid. I'm like a broken record, right, Granny? We heard that a couple times. I feel like a broken record. Sometimes these things stick. And with King Lemuel, they stuck, and he said, I'm retelling the things that my mother told me when I was young. Here's one of the things she said. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Isn't that cool? You know, if we were to sum this up in 2 words, you know what it would say? Do justice. Open your mouth for the mute. You see somebody being bullied? Open your mouth. Intervene. Make it your business. Step in, protect them, defend the vulnerable. For the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth. Judge righteously. Mishpat. Justice. Judge righteously. Is this what God intends? Does God really intend for you to sit here and belittle somebody? To talk down to them? As if they're literally standing right here and you're degrading them and talking down to them. You're in a restaurant, you hear somebody talking down to somebody, you hear somebody berating a little kid. What's it our job to do? To step in and to be a mouthpiece for the mute. Open your mouth, judge righteously. Is this what God expects? And defend the rights of the poor and the needy. I was looking at demographics, and this was really interesting. This will be interesting to you guys back in this corner. I mentioned last week that the children are the most hit by poverty in Somerset County. I looked up demographics and did a deep dive into the poverty in Somerset County. We're really on par for the national average. It's about 12%. 12% of people are living in poverty. And to break that down, children under the age of 18 in Somerset County, 12% of kids under the age of 18 are living in extreme poverty. That means they're hungry. That means a lot of them don't know if they have shelter from day to day. About 12%. That's a pretty significant number. Seniors 65 and over, it's 7%. We get calls from elderly people who are homeless. About 7% in that category. But what really jumped off the page, and I highlighted it in my little report here, looking at the percentage of children living in poverty in each school district in Somerset County provides a localized perspective on this issue. So children living in poverty, 12% throughout the county. For example, in Salisbury Elk Lick School District, 36% of children ages 5 to 17 live in poverty. That number jumps from 12% to 36% just a few miles south of us. By the way, Turkeyfoot is in a similar, Turkeyfoot School District is in a similar situation. Southern Somerset County is known for extreme poverty, like a whole different world. Looking at statistics with drug abuse, drug raids, violence, Southern Somerset County is hit exceptionally hard, harder than Somerset and anywhere north of us. And I think part of that is because we're kind of the hub. Somerset's the hub for Somerset County, so we have Tableland. We have all these services, the courthouse, police department. All these things are hubbed in Somerset. And you start getting away from that, and you get people who are living in poverty. They don't have access to the resources, which means these numbers are going to keep spiking. It makes natural sense. There are a lot of issues facing people living in poverty: lack of affordable housing, food insecurity, limited transportation options. Again, you get away from Somerset, we don't even have the best transportation set up here in Somerset. But you get away from Somerset and it gets much worse, a lot worse. Healthcare access, lack of access to quality education. All these numbers drop off dramatically the farther you get away from Somerset, where we're at right here. These are things that we need to be aware of. And I'm just putting this on your radar, not to say that hey, let's come up with a game plan and let's tackle this right away, but to say demographics are important. It's important to understand what the issues are, and we can't just pray for people and pray that their poverty goes away. We can't just say, all right, let's wait for government to step in and increase government spending. We can't do that. As Christians, it's our responsibility and obligation to not only feed people, clothe people, give people water, but to do justice. To find ways to look at people with the same lens that we look at each other. Without judgment, without looking down on people, and we step in and we open our mouth for the mute and for the rights of all who are destitute. We open our mouth, we judge righteously, and we defend the rights of the poor and the needy. I want to put this on your hearts because I want us to be thinking about these things and praying about these things, and that God gives us wisdom. And as we pack more Magi boxes, as we dig more wells, as we do all these things to serve people, we also need to be asking the question, what do we do right here in our own community as well? How do we do mishpat? How do we do justice? Let's pray about these things. Let's think about these things and pray that God gives us wisdom and direction. The needs are out there. There are plenty of them. And again, I am so excited to be at a congregation that gets it, that you guys really, truly understand this, that this is your heart. This is what we think about. It's what we feel. And it's where we walk, and it's what we do. I love that about all of you. If there's anybody this morning who's not yet taken that step to put Christ on in baptism and is ready, or if anybody has prayer needs, we would encourage you to come up. We're all going to stand and sing this song together.